She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm engaged to someone else. We've been together for a while now." She was still living under my roof when I calmly replied, "Well, congratulations to you both." That night, I had her escorted out by police, changed every lock and security code, and when her fiancé showed up demanding she be let back in, I let the cops answer for me. I, 38 male, never imagined that a simple dinner would end up becoming the night. My entire world collapsed right in front of me. My girlfriend, Veronica, 33, and I had been together for 4 years, 4 years of what I thought were shared dreams. Inside jokes, lazy Sunday mornings, and quiet nights watching movies on the couch. For the past 2.5 years, she had been living in my house. A place I had worked hard to buy, maintain, and turn into a home for us. That evening, everything felt perfect at first. She'd cooked pasta, poured wine, lit candles, and even put on that favorite playlist we used to listen to during our date nights. I thought it was going to be a celebration, maybe a promotion, maybe some happy news about her work or our relationship. But what she ended up telling me wasn't a celebration. It was the beginning of the most surreal, infuriating, and ultimately liberating experience of my life. She sat across from me, smiling in that way that usually meant she had something big to say. Her eyes were bright, her tone light, and everything about her seemed just a little too rehearsed. And then she did it. She placed her left hand on the table, and that's when I saw it. A diamond ring. Not just any ring, but one that I knew instantly didn't come from me. My heart froze. My fork stopped mid-air. The candlelight reflected off the stone like it was mocking me. "I have something to tell you," she said, her smile tightening. And then she dropped it like it was nothing. "I'm engaged to Bradley. We've been seeing each other for months. He proposed yesterday." For a moment, I couldn't even hear my own thoughts. It was like someone had hit the mute button on reality. I just stared at her, at the ring, at her face that looked so calm and pleased with herself. "You're engaged," I repeated slowly. "To someone else, while you're still living in my house?" She nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Yes, isn't it exciting? I wanted you to be the first to know." I actually laughed, but it wasn't a happy kind of laughter. It was the kind that comes from absolute shock, the kind of laughter that escapes when you're trying to wrap your head around something so ridiculous that it feels like a joke. "Veronica?" I said, my voice low but steady. "Are you having some kind of breakdown?" She looked offended by the question. "Of course not," she said, her tone dismissive. "I'm in love, Paul. Bradley is amazing. He's everything I've ever wanted." "And you're telling me this because?" I asked, still holding my fork but no longer eating. She tilted her head, seemingly confused by my calmness. "Well, because we live together," she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a child. "Obviously things will change now, but I figured we could work out a transition plan. Maybe I could stay another month or 2 while Brad and I find a place." I swear, in that moment, I felt my sanity teeter on the edge. I couldn't tell if she was being serious or if this was some kind of sick prank. The audacity, the entitlement, it was unreal. I stood up slowly, walked over to the cabinet, and poured myself a scotch. I took a deep sip, letting the burn ground me back into reality. Then I turned to her and said calmly, "Congratulations to you both." Her smile instantly returned, almost relieved. "Oh, thank you," she said sweetly. "I was worried you'd be upset." "Veronica," I said quietly, setting my glass down, "pack your things." Her smile faded instantly. "What?" "You heard me," I said evenly. "Pack your things. You have 2 hours." She blinked at me, her smile gone, her voice rising in confusion. "You can't be serious. I live here." "No," I said, my tone calm but firm. "You lived here. Past tense. You just announced you're engaged to another man while living under my roof. We're done. You're leaving tonight." Her face twisted with anger. "That's illegal," she snapped. "I'm a tenant. You can't just throw me out without notice." I couldn't help but let out a short, dry laugh. "You're not a tenant, Veronica. You're a guest. You never paid rent. You never signed anything. You're not on any bills or lease. You're my ex-girlfriend who I'm asking to leave my property. Her voice started to tremble. This is emotional abuse. You're throwing me out with nowhere to go. I looked her dead in the eye. Call Brad. I'm sure your fiancé has a place for you. Her eyes flashed with fury, and she pulled out her phone. I'm recording this. This is harassment, she shouted. Without hesitation, I pulled out my own phone and dialed 911. I made sure she heard every word. Yes, I said into the phone. I need assistance removing someone from my property. My now ex-girlfriend just announced she's engaged to another man and refuses to leave. Yes, I own the house. No, she's not on any lease or deed. Thank you. Her jaw dropped. You called the police? She screamed. You have 1 hour and 55 minutes, I said calmly before taking another sip of scotch. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived at the door. They were professional, polite, and clearly a bit amused by the situation. I showed them my ID, the property deed, and explained everything that happened. They listened carefully and then turned to Veronica. Ma'am, one officer asked, is it true that you announced your engagement to another man while living here? She crossed her arms. That's not illegal. The officer nodded patiently. No, ma'am, it's not. But if you're not a legal tenant and the homeowner wants you to leave, then you need to comply. I've lived here for years, she protested. I have rights. Do you have a lease agreement? No, but I receive mail here, she said desperately. That doesn't establish tenancy without other factors, the officer explained. Do you pay rent? I contribute, she yelled. At that, I opened my banking app and showed the officers every mortgage payment, every utility bill, all paid from my account. She's never paid a dime, I said calmly. The younger officer looked back at Veronica. Ma'am, you announced you're marrying another man. Why would you want to stay here? She looked cornered, her voice small but defiant. I just need time to figure things out. The older officer sighed and turned to me. Sir, technically she might have some claim to residency, but given the circumstances, ma'am, I strongly suggest you pack what you can tonight and leave voluntarily. Otherwise, this becomes a legal matter you don't want. That's when the waterworks began. She started crying, not out of sadness, but out of rage. Angry, heavy tears streamed down her face as she packed. This is so unfair, she shouted. The younger cop looked at her and said flatly, Ma'am, you told this man you're engaged to someone else. What exactly did you expect to happen? As she packed, I heard her on the phone with Bradley, her voice high-pitched and panicked. Apparently, Bradley lived with 3 roommates and didn't have anywhere for her to stay that night. She stuffed 2 suitcases and 4 garbage bags full of clothes, makeup, and shoes, all while live-streaming the entire thing on Instagram, telling her followers that I was throwing her out for finding love. When she finally finished, she turned to me at the doorway, wiping her face but trying to look strong. I'll be back for the rest of my things, she said coldly. Text me when, I replied. I'll have them in the driveway. You're going to regret this, Paul, she hissed. Probably not as much as you'll regret announcing your engagement over pasta, I said calmly. The officers waited until she drove away, in the car I had been letting her use, which I'd be dealing with soon enough, before turning back to me. Change your locks tonight, the older cop said, and maybe get cameras. Already got a locksmith on the way, I replied. The officer nodded, gave me a small smile and said, Smart man, good luck. That night, I sat in the quiet of my now peaceful house, the smell of her perfume still lingering in the air. I took a deep breath, finished my scotch, and realized something simple. I had just freed myself from a disaster I didn't even know I was living in. The next morning, the sunlight poured through the blinds like nothing had happened, but the silence inside the house felt different. Calmer, cleaner, lighter. I woke up early, made myself coffee, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel that suffocating tension that had slowly been creeping into my chest whenever Veronica was around. I walked through each room, seeing the empty spaces where her things had been, and instead of feeling sad, I felt something closer to relief. I knew I wasn't done with the situation yet. People like Veronica rarely leave quietly, but for that brief morning, I let myself enjoy the peace. Around noon, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Calls, messages, notifications, all from unknown numbers or from mutual friends asking me what happened. Apparently, Veronica had spent the entire night spinning her version of events online. According to her, I had thrown her out on the street for falling in love and destroyed her belongings out of jealousy. She had even posted a video crying in her car, saying how heartless I was. The comments were flooded with sympathy from people who didn't know the real story. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the videos to my lawyer just in case. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a cold, stern voice said, "Is this Paul?" I confirmed, and the voice continued, "This is Veronica's mother. What exactly did you do to my daughter?" I almost laughed. "Ma'am," I said, "you might want to ask your daughter what she did to herself. She announced her engagement to another man while living with me, and then expected to stay here like nothing changed." There was a long pause on the other end before she muttered, "Oh my God," and hang up. I could tell even she didn't know the full story. By the end of the week, Veronica tried to come back for her things. I'd already packed every item into boxes and stored them in the garage. When she arrived, she had that same arrogant look, like she still believed she controlled the situation. But that confidence faltered when she saw the locks changed, security cameras installed, and her belongings neatly stacked outside. She crossed her arms. "You had no right to touch my stuff." I pointed to the boxes. "I didn't touch anything except to pack it safely. You can take them and go." Then came the moment I'd been expecting. She tried to push past me into the house. I stood firmly in the doorway. "Veronica," I said calmly, "you step inside. I call the police again." She glared at me for a full 10 seconds before turning to her phone, calling Bradley, and whispering loud enough for me to hear. "He's being so controlling. Just get over here." When Bradley arrived, I finally got to see the man who'd caused all this. He was younger than me by a few years, dressed like he thought he was a celebrity. Sunglasses indoors, designer jacket, flashy watch. He walked up with a smirk. "So you're the ex?" he said casually. "Yeah," I replied. "And you're the fiancé who just found out his bride doesn't have a place to live." His smirk faded a little. "Look, man," he said, trying to sound cool. "There's no need for drama. She just needs a few days." I crossed my arms. "She's had days. The police have been here. This is over. She's leaving now." Veronica jumped in, her voice sharper. "You're just jealous because I moved on," she yelled. Bradley shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting her to be this unhinged in front of me. "Jealous," I repeated calmly. "You're standing outside my house, with your boxes on the driveway, begging me to let you in. Tell me, who exactly should be jealous here?" Bradley tried to calm her down, but she turned on him too. "You said I could stay with you," she snapped. "Your roommates don't even want me there." Bradley's eyes widened. "I never said that." He defended himself, but she cut him off. "You did. You promised we'd move in together." It was like watching two actors forget their lines in the middle of a bad play. I just stepped back and let it happen. Within minutes, they were arguing loudly, throwing accusations at each other about who lied to whom first. I quietly pulled out my phone, opened my security app, and started recording the whole thing. Eventually, Bradley looked around embarrassed, realizing neighbors were watching. "You know what?" he said harshly. "You're crazy, Veronica. I don't need this." He got into his car and drove off, leaving her standing there with her boxes and a face full of shock. For a long moment, she just stood there, silent. Then she turned to me, her eyes glassy but still burning with anger. "You think you've won," she said bitterly. "You'll be alone forever, Paul." I just smiled slightly. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll be alone in my own house." She scoffed, grabbed her suitcases, and stormed off down the street, muttering under her breath. I watched until she disappeared, then closed the door and locked it behind me for the final time. For weeks after, she tried little games, calling from different numbers, leaving passive-aggressive posts online, trying to get sympathy from mutual friends. But the truth has a way of crawling out eventually. People started realizing that her heartbreak story didn't add up. Someone even leaked the recording from that day when she and Bradley fought in front of my house. It spread quickly, and the comments that once poured with pity turned into laughter and ridicule. She went from playing the victim to becoming the joke. Meanwhile, I focused on moving forward. I got new locks, redecorated, even took a few days off work just to clear my head. I started going out more, hiking, meeting friends, enjoying the life I'd paused for a relationship that never deserved my time. One evening, about 2 months later, I got a message from a friend that made me laugh out loud. It was a screenshot of Veronica's new post. She and Bradley had broken up after he caught her messaging another guy. The caption read, "Some people just don't appreciate loyalty." The irony was so sharp it was almost beautiful. That was the moment I realized karma doesn't need help. It just needs patience. Everything she tried to do to me, the lies, the manipulation, the games, came crashing down on her naturally. I didn't have to scream or beg or get revenge. I just had to let her live in the chaos she created. Months later, I was sitting at the same table where she'd once announced her engagement. The candles were lit again. The same song was playing, but the energy was different, peaceful, honest, real. I was having dinner with someone new, someone who asked me how I knew when a relationship was truly over. I smiled, looked out the window at the soft glow of the city lights, and said, "When silence feels safer than their presence." That night, as I closed my eyes, I thought back to that moment when she'd looked me in the eye and told me she was engaged to another man. Back then, I thought it was the end of everything. But now, I knew better. It was just the beginning of finally getting my life back. And if there's one thing I've learned from it all, it's that you don't always need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes the quiet burn of distance and dignity is enough to let karma do its work. Perfectly, silently, and completely. Never beg someone to stay when they've already walked away in their heart. Let time, truth, and karma speak louder than anger ever could. If you felt this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and remember, silence is the sweetest revenge.